go. All right, hey everybody. We'll get started right on time. I was told by our presenters here that it's a very, very full presentation and session, so we should get started as soon as possible. My name is Matt. I'm with the product team. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Emily, aka Dr. K, and Mitch over here. They are going to be talking about our BYO strategy at Jamf. I'm really thrilled to introduce these two because I've gotten to work with them in close collaboration on the product side. We worked very diligently to build this stuff, and they were just as hungry to implement it. And you know, we each have some scars that we'll talk about today, but it's been a journey, and I'm thrilled that they're here to talk about it today. Now, I was told we probably won't have time for Q&A, but use your app for Q&A if you want to go and do that. I'll try to do some moderation. If we happen to have some time, I'll come up at the end. But with that, I'll introduce Dr. K and Mitch. Thank you.
Hi. As our esteemed colleague Matt just mentioned, this is a roller coaster of a session. We have a lot to cover. We likely will not have time for Q&A. We may even have some slides at the end where we say, hey, on the video later, pause so you can see the settings, so that we can try to cover everything for y'all today. We do have a brain date Wednesday morning. Jamf at Jamf AMA, so if you do have some questions that we don't have time to get to, feel free to swing by the brain date area around that time. My whole team will be there, including Tyler, who's here. Daniela may be here somewhere. The whole team is here. Mitch will be around as well. We can try to answer some questions. So, how we BYO at Jamf, or how we BYO'd at Jamf, because it is a thing we did. Mitch, we have already introduced. Mitch is a good friend and colleague of mine at Jamf. We actually started around the same time. And we started the same month, I think.
It was the same month, yes.
Yeah, April of 2021. And one of the very first projects that I had at the time as our enterprise management engineer was, hey, can you go figure out this whole like federation and new BYO stuff? And I was like, okay, sure. It's a bit of a journey, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
It was just 3 buttons, Emily. It was just 3 buttons.
So my team is called Client Platform Engineering at Jamf. Mitch is part of the Identity and Access Management team. We manage all Jamf-issued end-user devices. We're a part of Jamf's internal IT department, just to give you a sense of kind of where we're aligned, right? But as Matt mentioned, we do collaborate very closely with product, as you can imagine, because we work at the company that builds all the cool stuff that y'all use at your organizations to manage your devices, and that we use to manage our own devices, right? So we work very hard to align with product on new initiatives that are coming out. We try to give feedback early and often, and a really important part of that was this new account-driven user enrollment thing that Apple announced. We wanted to build it out internally so that we could show you all customers that it's possible, that you can do it, and what you need to do to figure it all out. So just to give you a sense of like kind of where the divisions lie before we dig in deeper. So for the client platform engineering side, which is my team, we handle the company-issued devices, so Macs, iPads, phones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mitch's group?
Yep, what we do is we handle the identity at Jamf. So basically, we are a multi-tenant environment. We have Okta, we have Azure, we have Google, we have anything with a login. That typically comes through our team. And so that means we pretty much intersect with every part of the business, including client platform engineering.
So we do a lot of collaboration with each other, and I just want to call out that as closely as our groups work with each other, and in particular, Mitch and I have worked together since we've started, this is the first time we're like in the real world space together doing something as part of the Jamf IT department, which is really cool.
It's pretty cool. 2.5 years, I haven't ever seen her face to face until now, so it's pretty awesome.
I got to hug him for the first time today. It was a really special moment. Same with Finn, who's here. Tyler on my team is up here too. We've seen each other a few times though, so no big deal there. So we will move on. So why did we want BYO? I mentioned the product alignment and the new features that Apple has released, right? But we also really wanted to have that identity-driven access to the resources on personal devices that we weren't able to do otherwise. It was part of what this new feature from Apple enabled. What we were really craving was the user privacy piece. We wanted the personal parts of that person's phone to be personal to them. We want them to feel like they have their own part of the phone that's theirs, and then we're just enabling the access to company resources on their personal device and only manage those company resources. The other thing that was really key was how do we get those company resources securely to our end users, and part of that was being able to give them a managed self-service application on their personal device. So they could choose what company stuff they wanted on their personal device and then not install what they didn't want. So just to kind of cover high level, bare minimum requirements for this before we really kind of dive in and give you an agenda and and show you our demo is you need to verify and really federate a company domain and Apple Business School Manager portal. And I'm going to guess, how many of you are you here because you want to hear about what the federation process is?
Ooh.
There's a few, right? It still feels like there's some unknowns, so we're going to try to cover some of the things that we've learned about that process in this session. You need mobile devices running iOS 15 or later, usually not a big deal right now to support this, and then Jamf Pro 1033 or later. Hopefully y'all are kind of beyond that at this point, but those are kind of your bare minimum requirements for this, right? So what we want to cover today, we're going to take a look at user enrollment. I'm going to show you a very real enrollment from a very test device so that you can just see what the whole thing really looks like for a Jamf employee. You're going to see what a Jamf employee goes through when they enroll their BYO device in our production server. We're going to go deep into federating Apple Business Manager with Azure, with Okta kind of in between as our actual true IDP and SSO. We're going to go over our basic BYO setup in Pro, and I'm going to go screen by screen. This is the group you need. This is the setting you need. You're getting it all. That's why we're barreling through this session. We're also going to talk about customizing and securing that Apple account-driven user enrollment experience with the settings and restrictions in Jamf Pro that are available on the MDM spec. And did I miss that last one? I think those were the main things here. I want to hop right into the demo. Let's see if we can catch up.
Everybody loves a demo.
Yeah, and if we have time at the end, we'll try to talk a little bit about per app VPN with Jamf Trust. We may run out of time, but let me get this demo started. So I'll try to talk you through this a little bit. It's only edited for time in a few authentication places and where I typed the password in wrong one time, which you'll see, which I wanted to keep it real. Okay, so this is a real enrollment that I recorded into our production instance. So we're going into settings. We're going down to VPN and device management, hitting sign into work or school account, and our good friend Jen Appleseed is typing very quickly to sign into Okta to get logged in. And here, this is the second authentication piece. That first one was into our management server, Jamf Pro. The second one is iCloud for the managed Apple ID. And here, once again, you're going to see our Okta instance, and Jane is typing very fast again. And here's where, oops, password was wrong. Let's try that again. And we're signing in, so we had those two authentication prompts, and now we're at that allow remote management piece. This is where instead of installing a profile, the management connection happens through the setup that we did for BYO. We approve that remote management, and now the phone is enrolled. That's it, no big deal, right? It's cool, you go back into settings, you see that work profile with the cute little ID badge thing, and you can go in and see you've got some iCloud storage, and oh, automatic app installation, Jamf Cloud wants to install this application. This first one is self-service, and then we see our managed browser, which for us is Microsoft Edge. And then you'll see a prompt for Jamf Trust, which provides our per app VPN for our managed applications. Those are all installed automatically on enrollment. All right, we're back at the screen. You can see those apps are installing from management automatically on the device. And I'm gonna catch your breath. Okay, Jamf Trust is installed. We're going to go into Jamf Trust, and we're going to sign in to enable that per app and user access to our company resources that rely on the per app VPN connection. We're going to make sure we allow notifications on the BYO device. You cannot manage user notification settings because that is a user space setting, so the user has to allow those notifications. And now we've got Jamf Trust enabled, and that connection will be used only for the managed applications set to use per app VPN. Now I'm going into self-service, and you can see I have a self-service application on my personal device with applications served to just my personal device. That will give me access to our internal resources. You'll see some familiar applications there. We use a lot of Jamf stuff at Jamf. If you're surprised by that, you probably shouldn't be. Go figure. So I'm going to go and install Outlook. I'm providing a managed copy of Outlook to our end users. And you'll see that in self-service, there's also a prompt to install. That's by design. We're installing it on the user's phone. We want to make sure they still want it. They can click cancel and not install it if they don't want to, right? And now I'm just going to give you a little demo. You can see that per app that VPN badge flash in the top corner. That's our per app VPN connection with Jamf Trust. And now just to give you a little example of some of our management that happens, I'm going to try copying some text out of my managed browser and go to my personal notes app and try to paste it. And I can't. Pasting is restricted into the personal notes for that personal Apple ID. And if you go into the settings for the management, you will see the restrictions for the copy and paste for those managed applications that were installed via our management server. So this is how Jamf employees use BYO. Now, what I thought we would do for today's presentation is to go kind of screen by screen through that and the things that you saw and explain how those settings are configured. And I'll kind of show you a screenshot and then we'll talk about the configuration. And there's a lot, which is why this is going to take a little bit of time, and I apologize again in advance for a likely lack of Q&A at the end of the session. So let's walk through the Jamf at Jamf BYO playbook. So we're going to have a few QR codes that pop up here that you'll be able to scan. This is to the Jamf Learning Hub that has a detailed overview of this process. It's going to be very similar to what you're going to see in our talk today. You'll want to have that bookmarked. It goes through a lot of what we are going to cover in this talk, and it has some great tips for success in it as well. So, prerequisite, defining your Jamf Pro enrollment information, and you're going to see it in that Learning Hub doc. So, when you initially set up this, you are likely going to go through some of these settings concurrently. You're probably going to start your federation process while you put this file in your domain while you do other things. We're just kind of trying to break this down programmatically. So one of the really important parts of this implementation is going to be going to the root of the domain that you have verified in Apple Business Manager and adding this file. It's going to be at yourdomain.com/wellknown com Apple Remote Management. This JSON file is really important. If you don't have access to the root domain of your company, for what maybe your marketing department owns it, your exchange people own it, whatever the case may be, right? You have a DNS team. You can host this somewhere else and do a redirect if they don't want to add additional files to the root of domain, and we're going to talk about that in a second here. So I will actually pass it right over to Mitch so he can talk about how we put this JSON file and the contents of it where it needed to be for our enrollment process. So, Mitch.
Hi, yes. So now that we've done all that, right, we know the prerequisites, it's time to get it hosted. So what we use is we use S3 on our side. We created an S3 bucket called .wellknown, and that's where we uploaded the JSON that you can see there. Once that is uploaded, we redirect to that using Route 53 for our DNS. And then also, because we're a global company, we use CloudFront CDN to kind of make sure that JSON file is available all around the world for quick and easy access. And that's how we got it up there. Back to you, Emily.
I will again point out that on the video later, you can just pause and look at how stuff is set
Pause
up.
will be your friend.
It'll be your friend on the
apologize in
recording.
advance.
So if you look at this file, you'll see that there's, in that remote management file, there is a URL defined there, right? That actually clicked me a little too quickly through. So you'll see company.jamcloud.com/cert. So when the device attempts that enrollment, so this screen that you saw in that demo video, what happens in this moment is the device says, hey, Apple, here's the domain that's trying to sign in. Apple says, I'm going to go look for that file at the domain and see where it needs to enroll. And that file determines where the device is going to go to enroll. So that'll be your Jamf Pro server, and it's going to be formatted for us, it's ourcompany.jamcloud.com/service discovery enrollment v1 user enroll. That's going to be the same everywhere. You would just pop in your domain, right, in that location. Okay. Last bit, when you really want to enable and get the bits ready in Jamf Pro, you just go into Settings, Global User Enrollment, iOS, check the box. You did it!
You're done.
JK, there's still a million more things to do. You're supposed to laugh more there, but that's okay. So you can customize a bunch of the text in Jamf Pro if you want to, or you can leave it for localization. I would probably just leave a bunch of the text at default there. Users probably aren't going to read through a whole lot of it anyway. But if you have a EULA or other things that your organization requires, you can go in and update that text just like you do for other user-initiated enrollment workflows in Jamf Pro. So let's get to the next part. So we authenticated to Pro. That was authenticating to Pro. Now we need to figure out that iCloud piece. That's the federation and the managed Apple IDs. So at this point, we hit the elephant in the room, which is how the heck do we provide the managed Apple IDs that the users need to do all this in the first place, right? And that happens in the Apple Business and School Manager portal where your managed Apple IDs reside. Okay, so let's cover the basics, right? You need a managed Apple ID, and it has to match the login used to initiate that enrollment. That means the domain needs to be the same. The emails all need to line up, right? This is accomplished by having managed Apple IDs in an Apple or School Business Manager portal with the verified domain in that portal that matches the domain of, I know it sounds repetitive, but I just want to make it really clear that the domain stuff really has to line up to establish that trust between the user and the institution that's providing the enrollment, right? The managed Apple ID needs at minimum a staff role. If you're like us and you have thousands of people that have Apple Business Manager access for managing devices and test servers and stuff like that, they can also have device enrollment role and other roles in the portal, but at minimum they have to have a staff role to be able to do this enrollment type. And then again, verified domain must match. When you go through and test this on test domains and then you go, well, this VPP token was from a different domain, it's not gonna work. It all has to line up. So that brings us to, back to Mitch, BFF, talk us through federating with Azure.
Oh, it's so much fun, Emily. So much fun. So let's federate. So first thing you got to do, obviously, is got to go ABM. You got to add the domain. So you go in ABM, you go underneath accounts, and you click on add domain there. Once that happens, Apple is going to give you a text string that you got to create a text record for in your DNS of choice. In our case, we use Route 53. So we created that text record along with that string, and that verifies that you own the domain. Once you see that and your records are straight, now it's time to federate. So when you click on federate, what will happen is you'll get a little dialog box that pops up, and it'll say, do you want to federate with Azure? You hit yes. It'll make you sign in using a global admin account inside of Azure, because what it's going to do is going to create an application in your Azure AD instance. And if all goes well, bingo, you'll have Apple Business Manager show up in your Azure AD instance. Good thing to note about this is an app that is managed by Apple. We have no controls over that. You can't do any kind of custom scripting with it. The only thing you can do is set up provisioning. And provisioning is one of the most important parts to make sure that you can meet all your compliance needs and all that fun stuff. And talking about provisioning, scoping is your friend. So when you go through and you set up this application and you're getting ready to provision your users, use scoping. In this case, we say sync only assigned users and groups. If you don't do that and you say sync everybody in the company, you're going to get your service accounts, you're going to get your break glass accounts, and everybody's going to have an ABM account. Doesn't matter if they work there or not. Not necessarily a good thing. So in our case, we said sync only assigned users and groups, and you'll see that here we said all Jamf employees, because we know if you belong to that group, you are in fact a Jamf employee. Once all that's done, then you got to make sure you check your attributes. Now, you have to check create, update, and delete. You need to have that so that way provisioning works properly. It does what it says on the tin. And then also there are certain only supported attributes, such as first name, last name, user principal name, object ID, department, employee ID, cost center, and division. There are custom attributes that you can do. Apple has some documentation on that, but it's very limited. My recommendation is stick with the defaults out of the box. It hasn't led us astray so far, so we should be good to go there. Once you do all that, I always like to trust but verify. So what you can do is you can use Azure AD's provision on demand feature to do a test run before you actually turn it on for good. So you click on provision on demand there. In that case, that picked me because I know I'm in that all Jamf employees group. And then I hit provision. And what you want to see is you want to see all green check marks. And what that lets us know is that it found the user. It found that the user was assigned to the application in Azure. It then was able to reach across to ABM and provision the user, which is exactly what you want. But for us at Jamf, we are not done yet because we are Okta shop. Okta is our primary IDP. And at the time, ABM did not federate with Okta at all. Now it does, using custom IDP that was just released. So for us, we have a two-hop system where basically ABM goes to Azure, Azure goes to Okta, and then back down the chain. So for us, we federated Microsoft 365 with Okta. Scan that QR code, takes you right to Okta's documentation if you want to learn how to do all of that. So let's put it all together. So user hits continue on the button here. ABM will redirect to Microsoft 365. Microsoft 365 redirects to Okta. User logs in. Okta sends successful auth back to Microsoft 365. And M365 sends successful auth to ABM, which then signs in the user. So that little 2-second part of that video took all that work to make that happen. And now back to you, Dr. K.
You're the GOAT. He did so much work to get that all working. Mitch is the best, and I'm very glad he's here to talk through that with you all today. So we'll go back to, I think, the part that probably causes the most consternation, which is the unknowns around how the managed Apple IDs and Apple ID reclamation process happens.
So many.
So, the idea is, when you federate an Apple Business Manager portal, that action that he mentioned, you click the button, and then poof, it's done. Except what happens in the background is Apple goes through the Apple ID service. It looks for anything that uses the domain, and then it sends them a notification. It says, hey, a company wants your Apple ID. You have 60 days. You need to go change it to something else, right? Part of what you're going to run into here is making sure you have a clear understanding and you communicate to your organization the difference between a personal Apple ID and a managed Apple ID and what that means. Something that's worth noting is when the federation process happens and there's a conflict, you're not overtaking the other Apple ID. Apple cannot take that personal Apple ID and make it into a managed one. It belongs to the person who signed the terms and conditions with Apple to create that account. So Apple is saying, we're going to move it regardless. So either you move it to another login that doesn't use this domain, or we're going to dump it on a temporary one for you. So that when you do finish the federation process, it's a brand new Apple ID using that email. Right? That's what happens, okay? So it's worth just talking through that because people are going to think that that process is trying to claim the actual Apple ID. It's not. It's claiming the login, right? The content assigned to that Apple ID, the pictures, the photos, the apps that were bought in the App Store still belong to that personal Apple ID forever. It's that domained email that they use to sign in that has to change, okay? Just to clarify that. So, like I said, the conflicts have to be cleared for the verified domain to actually resolve and for federation to complete. The reserved domain provided by Apple. So if you go to your tenant right now, you'll see you have a generic appleid.com reserved domain. It'll be like for us, we have a billion, but there's like jamfcom.appleid.com is one example, right? You'll have something similar in your portals, right? You can use that to create additional managed Apple IDs that aren't federated if you need them for other things. And you can do that for your employees, right? If they end up needing something that they want to be a company Apple ID that isn't federated. And you may need to do that because there are going to be services that don't support it, like GSX, like some of the commerce portals. Some of those things will not, they have their own rules around domains that can sign into them that don't always support federation. So you'll want to keep that in mind. What I would recommend when we start getting into Dr. K's tips and tricks here, is talk to your AppleCare team. They will hook you up in a conversation with systems engineers at Apple. They can do, and I think I'm probably going to touch on this a little bit again, a dry run and see what'll happen if you attempt federation and give you a sense of what may or may not happen when you try to click that button. And just to give you a little bit of knowledge here, we're going to skip to this Apple ID conflict email thing. I've got some examples in here. I've shared them in the Mac Admin Slack in the past as well. When you go in and the reclamation happens, this email is sent. It provides instructions for how the end user is going to change that Apple ID to resolve the conflict. And it says in it, if you don't update it, you will have a temporary Apple ID, and it tells you where to go. There's there's actually a format that it'll flip the accounts to. So let's say your HR department is like, what about this ex-employee that might be using it? You can say, okay, HR, if you know their email address was first.last@company.com, you know that if they don't do anything and it just flips over and they reach out to you later, the format is going to be first-last.whatever@temporary.appleid.com. And this is actually laid out in a user-facing KB. Oops. I skipped a little too fast. It's a user-facing KB, so you can equip your support desk or your HR department, whoever you think might hear about people getting emails from Apple about the Apple IDs. You can say, here's Apple's documentation, what's going to happen if you don't change the login to your Apple ID. The other thing that I will recommend, because we even heard today, Apple is introducing a bunch of enhancements to Apple Business Manager and what managed Apple IDs can and can't do and how organizations manage them. I would recommend you go back and review the Do More with Managed Apple ID session from WWDC 2023. Some of that stuff is starting to roll out in beta in some of the portals now, so you can check your beta features, but not all of it is implemented yet, so we'll just point out that resource. So let's talk about my tips and tricks for Apple IDs. So I don't want to prescribe anything, even though I kind of am. What I just want to give you is what we learned. Part of, again, what Jamf at Jamf does is we go through these processes early with our product teams, with our own employees, so that we are equipped to talk to you all as customers and our own employees about what this process looks like and how we can best help you leverage Apple at your organizations, right? So here's some of the things that we've learned. Okay, so at the very beginning, when you're ready to do this, request a meeting with Apple systems engineers to discuss potential federation blockers and attempt a dry run. They'll go in and they'll say like, okay, let's just see what might happen. We like insta-failed. It was like less than a second.
I don't even think they pressed a button yet and we failed.
They just knew. We sat on the call, they're like, oh, you're gonna fail immediately. And here are the things that you should look for. And they will tell you all those things based on what they know about your account, right? So definitely reach out to your Apple Care team and work with the systems engineers to see what you should start working on. Talk to groups internally at your organization early about what Apple services are being used that you may not realize. Finance and purchasing, buying stuff direct from Apple or resellers or whatever the case may be. Get a sense of what Apple IDs are being used for so that you can prepare for that kind of thing. Especially developer groups, if you have folks that build apps at your organization, you'll want to work with them as well. One of the things that we did to try to help with some of that is we actually created a handful of subdomains with mail routing. Every Jamf employee has an alias to create a personal work Apple ID. I'm trying to call them like consumer Apple IDs. Everybody can go and create a work-adjacent personal Apple ID, right? That's not federated, that they can use for other things they may need to, right? And reserve that managed Apple ID for doing enrollments like this for their devices so that they can have a personal Apple ID that functions that way and still have it be work-related. You can do like corp.yourorg.com or appleid.yourorg.com or whatever and just make it an alias so people can create additional Apple IDs if they need them and still be able to receive mail to them. Here's some potential gotchas. Note here, read slide. Okay, I'm reading the slide. Primary reason federation is going to fail on your first attempt, especially if you're an organization that does a lot of merger and acquisition, you're at an educational institution that has a bunch of different portals or different orgs that handle their own purchasing, you're probably going to run into other portals that have your domain verified in them. In 2020, I think it was, Apple changed the rules and said you can't verify domains in multiple portals. You used to be able to. Right? I mean, we ran into that. Jamf.com was in all sorts of, I think it was in like 19 different Apple Business and School Manager portals somehow. That was the longest process for us, was figuring all of that out. So if you already know your organization has multiple portals, what you'll want to do is go in and see if your domain that you want to federate is verified. And if it is, you'll want to take all of the managed Apple IDs out that have that domain and remove the domain. You'll have to do that first. And Dry Run is going to help you with that too. They'll tell you that almost immediately. If someone goes into a personal Apple ID, like if I go to my personal Apple ID and I add my work email as a reachable at, as a secondary, that's also considered a conflict. They'll also get a note, but the note will say, your reachable at address is going to be removed after 60 days. Nothing else has changed, it's just going to rip the email off. Organizations that use the Apple Developer Program, you have to account for that with how the Apple IDs were invited into your account. If there's CI/CD stuff that goes through command line that uses managed Apple IDs and your federation process will turn on multi-factor for authentication, it won't work. So you'll want to figure something out, give them those secondary consumer Apple IDs that are work-like with a subdomain or whatever the case may be to try to circumvent some of that. And then a note on APNS certs. So, and this is just a general note for anybody anyway. If your APNS cert that you use for Apple services was created with a personal Apple ID, you can migrate it to another account What I would recommend would be to create a non-federated managed Apple ID in your Apple Business or School Manager portal, and then reach out to AppleCare, and they will migrate the cert for you. There's no interruption of service, no re-enrollment required. You just have to provide simple information about that certificate to them, and they'll move it for you. Rich Troughton's blog, which everybody knows, their founder, has a great walkthrough about how to do this and what AppleCare needs from you. When we did it, it happened in about 30 minutes. We sent them everything we needed to know. We sent them what account currently had it, where we wanted it to move to, and then they replied and we're like, done.
And that's very important as a software company.
Yeah. So think about it like this. You can use non-federated managed Apple IDs that you manually create in a portal like service accounts. That way you have the ability to rotate passwords and do that kind of stuff on those things that you're using for Apple services. And it's probably a good practice at this point to do, especially if you're at an organization that uses APNS, which I would imagine a lot of you do, as we're here talking about managing Apple devices. So how to prepare your end users. Stress that when you go through this process, that they can change the Apple ID to another email address. Their data is not going to be lost. And even if they don't, it's going to be on that temporary address we talked about. It's not going anywhere. Nothing's going to be deleted or lost. They'll be able to just change how they log into that stuff. Would recommend in your org style, whatever that is. We're a combo of ServiceNow and Confluence, Slack messages, all sorts of stuff like that. Whatever works for your organization that will get the most people, write up some documentation for them that talks about why you're updating the Apple ID, what it means, what it's enabling for you, which is this cool BYO stuff, right? Make sure that they understand that the move to federation is going to unlock new functionality that focuses on user privacy and data protection. They're going to have the user privacy on the personal part of their phone, while the organization's company data is secured, and those two things are separate, and that's very good. They want that, you want that. And don't forget that they have 60 days. So stress, when you get the email, you don't have to do it right away. I wouldn't wait, but you've got 60 days. So use the 60 days to figure out what your approach is going to be, right? And go from there. On the topic of the domain conflicts that might happen if you know you have access to multiple portals at your organization, I've got some examples here. I just dug through my email because I'm an administrator on, I think, 13 or 14 different portals at this point, as I went through Jamf's ecosystem and said we need to rip jamf.com out of everywhere so we can federate. So you'll see there's a few examples here. No username conflicts found is impossible, but when it's a test domain, it can happen, which is nice. That's what that looks like. When there's a domain conflict found, you'll see the one in the middle. It'll say domain conflict. It'll give you an idea of, and it'll say like another organization is using this domain. Like you need to figure out who. They're not going to tell you who. They're not going to intercede. That's something that you need to remember. And then when the resolution happens of the verified domains being released and it just being in your portal, you'll get the most beautiful email of all time. I think I cried that day.
I know I did. I saw that
when
one.
we finally there was one portal in Poland somewhere, and the one admin was on paternity leave, and I'm very happy that he was, but man, we were really trying to get federation over the finish line, and it was a bummer. When we finally got that email, it was a blessed day. And I do want to point out, too, that after you federate, so the other conflict that's going to happen, right? The biggest unknown is what's the potential for all the other Apple IDs out there that might exist that I don't know about. The ones that you are going to know about are the ones that line up with active objects in your IDP in Azure. And every day, if you have SCIM enabled, you're going to get a report that looks like this. And it'll say what was successfully created, what has a conflict. So your current employees that you can reach out to and be proactive with, you'll get a list of who hasn't resolved it yet. So you can be, at least for the objects you know exist and the people that do work at your organization that are in scope of this, you'll get a report that says which conflict is resolved and what isn't. So you do have some knowledge there.
Yeah, and the way to find that is on the Azure AD application. Under provisioning, there'll be provisioning logs, and you can just dump that to a CSV, which is what you see here.
Yeah, this is also sitting in the Apple Business Manager portal. It's the same file. And you can just go into your activity in your portal and download it and look. And seeing that number go down a little bit every day felt really good. And then on that last day when the 60 days hit and we didn't get these reports anymore, it felt really good / kind of scary, but also really good. So Yeah, federating Apple Business Co-Manager, no big deal, easy. Done. Okay, let's move on. No laughter, that's fine. It's a tough process. Wah, wah. All right, so then we get to, in our demo, if you remember it, I feel like it's already been, gosh, 30 minutes. We now get to the point where we allow remote management. And this is where we get into the nuts and bolts of the fun bits in Jamf Pro of how we actually configure how we want all this enrollment stuff to work for our end users, right? We've got shiny managed Apple IDs. We can do cool things with them. Woohoo! All right, so here's what you need. Smart groups. Jamf Pro is the best at smart groups. You need them for this too, and it's great that they are. Settings and restrictions for your BYO devices, and we're going to talk about a little bit, at least show you where you can go to find out what the MDM spec is for BYO and what you can and can't do. Apps and books licenses via volume purchase so that you can deploy managed applications to those BYO devices. Automatic assignment for the VPP licenses so that they can actually install them. App config, which I love, to customize app onboarding and enforce some settings within each application that you need. And then we're probably not going to have time. We'll probably click through, and you'll have to pause on the video later, but we will try to show you settings for per-app VPN. All right. I'm so tired already. All right, so let's talk a little bit about criteria for BYO inventory. Management server can only report on apps and settings that are in the work partition that's created during enrollment. You can't see what apps are installed by their personal Apple ID on the personal partition of their phone. That is good. That is potential PII. You don't want it. If this is a personal device, that's their stuff. I don't want to know. I just want to know the managed stuff on your device. It's really the best approach in my opinion anyway. But that means you can't report on any of that, right? And that may be something that's a little tough to get out of your head, especially when someone may already have Google Chrome installed and then you're trying to install Google Chrome on a managed side that they already have it, and you can't do that. And you don't know because it was installed on the personal partition, right? So you're gonna run into some of these little quirks of how you manage devices as you go. The other thing is you can't build any reporting on the personal partition as well, right? That criteria is just not available in the management server. That's by design. The limitations are by design by Apple. When someone inevitably comes to you and says, but I want to build reporting on lockout time on their phone or whatever, right? Or I want to know what all the carriers are. There's your receipts. This is from the Apple deployment guide. You'll want that bookmarked. You're going to have to reference it a lot because someone's going to come to you and say, but why can't you deploy this setting this way? Why can't I turn off this thing for BYO devices like I do on institutional? This guide tells you exactly what the specs are and what you can and can't do. And if someone's upset, you can say, go talk to Apple, which is always the way you want a discussion to end on something. So let's talk smart groups. I'm just going to click through this real quick because this stuff is pretty straightforward, right? So you're going to need a smart group for managed Apple ID like your domain. And you're going to use that for scoping licensing. Because remember, you're managing the access to the identity of the person. You're not really managing the phone. You're managing the access that person has and that they can get to on their phone. So a lot of the scoping is going to be around device ownership and the managed Apple ID and who they are. So the easiest way to do that is to set up everything on this smart group for a managed Apple ID like your domain. The other thing you're going to need is one that's device ownership type is personal, or account-driven user enrollment. And I know it gets cut off a little bit there, and yes, this is an old version of V11. I'm sorry that it does look a little different now, but I wanted to give y'all a little sense of what version 11 looked like in our slides today. So you'll see the text gets cut off a little bit there. That ellipsis will have personal account-driven user enrollment as a device ownership option to autofill that for you, so you don't have to worry about the value there. The other thing you'll want as a companion to the other one is to have a device ownership type that's institutional. I recommend here that when you set up your profiles and deployments, you're likely going to want to focus on ownership type. So you'll have your deployments and profiles for your institutional supervised devices, and you'll have another set for your personal or BYO devices. And this is where God, we have 5 minutes left? 5 minutes. God. All right.
That's all we got.
Let's roll through. So you'll also want a category. Category is going to be helpful for your own management in your server so you can see what's for personal devices and what isn't. A note on settings and restrictions on BYO. So again, Apple deployment guide is going to be your friend here. It lays out exactly what payloads are or not available for user-enrolled BYO devices. So when management comes to you and says, can you do X, or why can't you do Y? Apple built this user privacy first, company data protection, right? We're not managing the phone, we're managing the access to the resources on the phone. So if you can kind of get that mantra going in your head as you have these conversations internally, it's going to be helpful for you. Maybe not for management that wants to do everything like it's supervised, but it's just reality. At a certain point, you're in Apple's reality, right? Again, user enrollment, MDM information from the deployment guide is your friend. Okay, so MDM can and can't. Here's just an example of that list. It'll say what you can do and you can't do. So you can access inventory of managed apps, but you cannot access inventory of personal apps, right? And so it's all laid out there pretty clearly. You'll also want to note, and this was the biggest point of consternation still internally, passcode requirements, because everyone loves passcode requirements if you work in a state ramp ready or state ramp required organization and you have to have these stuff in place. Just know that no matter what value you put in for this restriction, all it's going to do is put in a simple passcode, 6-digit, force pin true, min length. That's it. You could load that with whatever 16-digit insane alphanumeric whatever you want. It's only going to apply this. And that is going to confuse people. Not you, because you're all brilliant Mac admins, but some of the kind of maybe security management at your company is not going to understand. But I put at that value, and why doesn't it apply? Because Apple said so. And again, your receipts are right there. You'll want them. All right.
You should just make that the header everywhere you go of your email. Say, go look at that.
I had to make a special KB internally just on passcode. That is one of the most read pages in our Confluence area because we get asked about it all the time. So let's go back to Jamf Pro. You'll see, just kind of give you a sense of what you'll want to look for when you're setting up some of these payloads. If it says supervised, it's not going to work for BYO. BYO is considered unsupervised, right? So you'll want to check that when you're going through and figuring out what your settings to be. If it says supervised, just it's not going to work. It just won't. That is by design. To give you a sense of how we have our restrictions set up, it's very light. Because again, we are giving personal phones access to company resources. The phone this is my phone in my pocket. I bought it, it's mine. I'm providing myself, which is fun, access to company resources, and I'm only managing that managed part, right? So what I'm restricting is down to those managed resources, okay? So like the required passcode thing, I'm going to bring it up again, and again, because you're going to get a lot of questions about it. Make sure you have those receipts there. For people that are curious about how that's applied on the device, they can go in and look at the restrictions. It's very transparent on the device. So if someone that enrolls this way wants to know what's happening, it's there, it's laid out for them. Managed app restrictions is probably the most, complex seems like a strong word here, but this is probably the most critical part for us. And the idea here is that if you go in and you copy something from a managed app, you cannot paste it into an unmanaged. We're keeping the work data and the personal apps separated, and we're reinforcing that with these restrictions. On the alternate side, we don't mind if you go into Mac admin Slack and copy a link and then paste it into Slack EMM, but we don't want company data out of our work Slack going into your personal notes file or to an unmanaged email being sent somewhere, right? We're trying to really compartmentalize that data. And again, on the device, you'll see all of that listed out very clearly in the restrictions for that account. It's all laid out right there. Copy and paste are managed. AirDrop is considered unmanaged, so you can't AirDrop from a managed app to unmanaged over AirDrop, right? That kind of stuff. We'll see if this, probably talk through this demo a little bit. You showed it in the demo before, but it's been like 45 minutes, so I'm gonna show you this again because I think it's kind of cool, right? I'm going into my personal notes app and I'm like, oh, I'm copying something from this Jamf thing. Oh, I can't. I just think that's really cool, and I love the transparency that the end user has that says, hey, this is managed data that you're trying to put in an unmanaged source, so we can't let you do that, I'm sorry. No soup for you. So deploying apps, and we're like super out of time already, I think. We have like 2 minutes. So the prompts are going to happen no matter if an installation is automatic or self-service. It's the user's phone. It's all about transparency. We want them to acknowledge that they're installing it. Even if they click the self-service thing, hey, I know you clicked this, but you are installing this. Are you still cool with that? That's what these messages are for, right? And it'll happen for any of those applications, regardless of how they install them. That's by design. Again, it's from self-service, by design. They're gonna have that transparency there. When you set up your deployment in Jamf Pro, I'm just gonna kind of glance through this quickly because it's the same as your VPP settings for that you probably already have set up for managed applications through the App Store, through Apps and Books. You just have to make sure, the tricky part here, it shouldn't be tricky, but if you're in a complex organization that has a lot of servers and VPP tokens, it all needs to line up. It all needs to be from the same server with the same domain and the same portal. If you're like us and you have a lot of test instances and then your VPP token gets flipped around and then it breaks and you go, why can't I deploy this app? Oh, it's from the wrong VPP portal. That stuff happens. For the apps to be available, you need to take those smart groups we talked about and set up an automatic invitation for a volume assignment and make it available to all those managed Apple IDs. And anytime you add a new app that you want someone to install from self-service or whatever else, you need to make sure that you go into apps for your VPP assignment for your managed Apple IDs and add it there. And then if you go to the record, you'll see what VPP content is available for that device on the user record in Jamf Pro, which is cool. For your mobile device apps, I would recommend to categorize and then have your deployments be set for account-driven or for institutional, because you may have settings that are different between the two. Just to give you a sense here, self-service, you're probably going to deploy that. What's fun about managed applications deployed in this method is when they go in and unenroll or remove enrollment, all of the work partition disappears, which includes the apps. So you don't have to worry about removing, if MDM is removed, remove the app. It's going to happen no matter what. You don't even have to check the box if you don't want to. App config is a big thing, right? The app config from the Jamf docs for self-service, we use the same one. You may notice that serial number is in there. You won't get serial number off of BYO. A lot of applications from vendors will go, I don't know this value, I'm just going to ignore it. Some won't. I would check in the app config documentation from your vendor. Come by my, I'm doing a session with Kyle Hammond on Thursday morning on managed app config. We're going to talk about this stuff in a little more detail there, so swing by if you're curious about it. You may, and the whole idea of deploying the two apps per device ownership type. You may see on Slack EMM for our personal devices, we actually deploy, we have a browser set as a managed browser so that when you click a link in Slack EMM, it opens the managed browser so it stays on our per app VPN connection. So you'll want to check with your vendor of your applications. I'm going to show you that a little bit. Edge is our managed browser for BYO, how that works. We just don't have time for this. I'm so sorry.
It's cool, but we don't have time.
It's super cool. So we're going to click through very quickly, and then on the video later, you can pause and see what our settings are in Radar to enable Jamf Trust and what the profile looks like. So why do we want it? We want all the traffic to go over our per app VPN connection through Jamf Trust. That's where we want all of our company data to go. And what's cool about this that I will call out as we try to barrel through the end of this presentation, and you all are so patient and I love you for still being here, is that the personal partition can still use private relay even if you have per app VPN on the managed apps, because that VPN traffic is only for the managed applications, and the Safari browser, for example, is a personal browser, so it can use private relay. So you can have the best of both worlds, which is also great for user privacy. And it gives you that cool little badge in the corner that everybody always talks about in the sales demos, right? That's like the best part. And just to give you a sense of what that looks like, in Radar, there are settings here. We're scoping it to the BYO devices. I know I'm taking over for you, Mitch, but I'm just trying to barrel through on this part.
You're good, go for it.
We're going to just keep clicking. Here's a QR code on how to get some of this set up in Radar for UEM Connect and being able to do this based on groups. Okay.
Honestly, that should have been its own session, but we just didn't get approved for that one. So
maybe next year.
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year. You can all go and give feedback and say, the Jamf IT team had so much to talk about, they should have had more than one session on the schedule. All right, so here's what the settings look like in Radar. I'm trying to click through builds.
And that, you want all those checked for the goodness. If you don't have those checked, you will not get the goodness.
I can't click anymore.
Oh no, no more clicks. There it goes.
There it goes.
Yep, and then right there is where you download it.
It gives you the profiles and the managed app config to just paste right into your deployment in Jamf Pro for those applications. Yeah, in Pro you'll have your per app VPN settings. You'll have managed app config that you get out of Radar, And then all you see at the bottom, you'll see per app networking. You'll have your per app VPN connection that was set in that profile. You just click that drop down and save. And then whenever that app launches, it'll use that per app VPN connection for all the traffic, which is awesome. And again, you get the cute little VPN badge that appears that everybody loves. It's so cute. The note here is if you use per app VPN, you have to deploy your Exchange profile in the same thing, and we just don't have time. Come to our brain date tomorrow. We'll talk all about it. It's wonderful. So federation isn't easy. Don't let it intimidate you. The enrollment is super cool. It enables so much for your organization. It enables user privacy and data protection for your company's resources on whatever device the user wants to use. It's really the best of all things. And when they sign out, all this stuff is going to disappear, and we're going to leave it on that. So thank you so much for joining us today. I know we barreled through. Thank you for sticking with us. We are very clearly engineers who just built a thing out and wanted to talk about it. So come to our brain day tomorrow if you want to talk more. We're on Mac Admin Slack. We are Jamf IT, so we're available to talk about stuff. And for the really good product-y bits, this is the guy.
Yeah,
He knows everything.
No. You guys made it happen. I mean, it was all just shelfware otherwise. So, yeah, we'll be up here for a little bit to answer some questions. I got some that I came in through the iPad. Don't know if it was you guys, but we'll do our best to answer some questions here. And thank you. Thanks for...
Thank you, guys. Thank you all.
Should
Great
we
job, you
stick
guys.
around? Do you want to stick around later to ask some questions? I know we're at the end. You can leave.
This isn't school. We can leave whenever we want.
Yeah, okay, well, I could do a few questions then. So
Do
if
you
gotta
mind?
leave,
Do you
go ahead,
mind
leave.
sticking around a little bit, Matt? Are you good, Mitch?
I'm good. Let's do it.
Okay. Again, I know it was a ton. Thank you so much for bearing with us while we tried to get through all of that. But we're happy
Yeah.
to try to answer some questions if you choose to be here. It's up
There
to
we
you.
go. Okay, number one question. Can you manage built-in iOS apps?
No.
No, because
yes?
it's in a personal.
I think it's a
personal
trick
container.
question.
That is a trick question.
Yeah.
Because, so it depends on,
You can manage accounts.
You can manage accounts, but not the app.
That's
right.
Yeah.
So the built-in applications, you could so just like we saw with the per app VPN, you could do managed accounts, and those managed accounts can tie to a per app VPN and also to all that thing. So it's actually a pretty cool experience. Like within the Mail application, you're actually using per app VPN for your managed Exchange account, but all your personal accounts are not, and the user has no idea it's actually happening.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
To its detriment sometimes, because you see the VPN badge appear even if it's in the traffic for the
Yeah.
personal accounts are not actually using it. It's your
There's
other
been some
account.
change in
So there's-
behavior within the Mail app as well. It's interesting.
This is what it's like when we talk about this stuff, so I'm really sorry. We're like, yeah, but there's this one scenario. Oh, we talked to Apple about this thing. This is very much how we all work together. So
Yeah, no,
That's
it's
why
good.
user comms is your friend.
Yeah.
Over
That's
communicate everything.
yeah. Should we flip to the crowd and then maybe another one?
Yeah,
from the iPad?
yeah. Let's flip to the crowd. Does the crowd have one?
Yeah. I'll repeat it.
Yeah.
Being able to use private relay and still have the VPN function, is that if you install a different browser, or is that still?
Yeah, so one of the many things that we sped through like a bullet train was that Safari is the personal browser, and we at Jamf deploy a secondary browser, Edge, as our managed browser. Because you can't deploy a second copy of Safari. You also can't manage the personal browser with management because it's the personal browser and then the partition is separated. So yeah, we made the choice to do Edge because we felt like it was less likely, at least on the Apple side, that folks would have Edge installed already as a personal browser over Firefox or Chrome, right? And to be fair, the Edge browser and the app config for Edge, which I'm going to talk about in the app config session as an example on Thursday, you can actually do a lot of really great management with it, and part of it is because of the management capabilities that's built in for Intune, but also applies with managed app config through Jamf Pro and other MDMs. So it's actually a really great option for a managed browser, which was another appeal of us using it.
Absolutely, and yeah, and you know, while they have managed accounts for Mail apps and everything, even though Apple introduced some really neat stuff with profiles in Safari, it's unfortunately not fitting that model yet. So I can imagine it's going to head there eventually if you look at it, but it's definitely not there yet. So the second browser is the way to go.
Yep.
Okay, another question here. Can you be signed into both your managed Apple ID and personal ID at the same time on iOS, on macOS?
Technically, okay, let me break that down.
So yeah.
We can see, here, let me click through another one so you see some screens. You can, so there's the, and I could show you my own phone, because my phone, your phone is BYO,
yeah, exactly.
his phone's BYO. We all have we're all BYO users. You have a BYO one too. Finn, you're institutional. You don't count. We love you, but you just get out. Just kidding. We love Finn so much. So yes, on iOS, you see, and you can very clearly see the personal Apple ID at the top, and you'll see your family and all that stuff, right? And then you'll see the work ID with the cute little work badge next to it. And you can see how the two coexist on the device. Technically on macOS, you can. Technically, it can create a work partition with APFS. It's designed to do that. The trick is that not all MDMs really support all of the management of that on macOS. And part of that's coming with like device enrollment for macOS and some of the stuff that's being enabled with the release of Sonoma next week, I think, right? In terms of our timeline. So this conversation is going to change quite a bit in the next few months as MDMs onboard device enrollment for macOS. Account-driven device enrollment, right?
That's the one, yeah. So, I mean, user enrollment, think BYO. We haven't seen a ton of demand for macOS BYO. If you have use cases, would love to hear them. But the account-driven device enrollment follows this exact same flow, and we don't have time to talk about it today. But it uses that same well-known file and that association, so that you can actually steer Macs to become account-driven enrolled, which means they will actually get onboarded as a supervised macOS device. So it's a fully managed device. That is owned by the organization, but no URLs, as we talked about in the keynote.
Yeah, and the piece that's missing there right now, forward-looking whatever alert. App config does exist for macOS as of version 11 of macOS 11. It's now confusing because we have Jamf Pro version 11.
There we go.
But I don't think any MDMs have implemented managed app config for macOS devices yet. I think that's going to end up being an important part of account-driven device enrollment for macOS in the future. To have app config where those management pieces for that app very specifically are installed in time with the app during the deployment. I think that's going to be important at some point.
Sure. Cool. Let's do another audience one. Oh, close to my heart.
Okay, you have to repeat what he said, though. 'cause
Yeah,
they may not
so
have heard.
the question was, is Apple getting rid of VPNs and moving towards relays? Is that the right question? So, and if so, will this all work? So I will say that I don't think Apple's getting rid of VPNs anytime soon. They're too baked in. Now, they're definitely painting a picture of how they see the future of networking moving. Network relays, in short, is iCloud Private Relay built for enterprise. It's using a technology called Mask, and it's using the QUIC protocol and all this other sort of fun stuff. But the idea is that it's a stateless, like session TLS based connection for tunneling apps instead of network segments. And it's deployed through a profile. It uses a lot of goodness like managed device attestation. To answer the second part of your question, will we support it? The beauty of this is as soon as that stuff starts coming around, you can deploy it through a configuration profile to those managed applications, and you're all set. So it's all part of that whole ecosystem that Apple's trying to build.
You are the perfect person to answer that question.
That was like made for you.
I have a
know, that's
passion
part of why I
for
wanted
this
him to
networking
host
stuff.
this session, because he knows that piece of it.
Yeah. No, it's
to a depth
exciting,
that's insane.
and there's it's an exciting area that Apple's investing in there. So.
Cool. Another question?
Right. Another question from the audience. How do you deal with managed Apple IDs for service accounts you might have?
So I'll give you a very real example. We have one that is called corp.jamf.com that we have a subdomain for that is set up in Apple Business Manager as a verified domain that we own. When we need a service account, we'll take a distro list and we'll add that as an alias, and then we'll just create the managed Apple ID using that domain, and we'll use that for whatever service. Or for example, like APNS, we have one now, I don't remember what exactly it's called, but it's like IT APNS at corp.jamf.com, something like that we moved our APNS certificate to so that we can centrally manage it like a service account. So you can use the built-in reserved domain, the yourorg.appleid.com, or you can make your own pretty one if you want. It's kind of up to you. We like pretty things here, so we went that route.
And it works good
that's
for
how you do it.
notifications too, right? So like if you're going to get emails to it and that kind of thing, you're having it to an alias that you have mapped to a distribution group makes sense.
Yeah, it's also super handy for it to be a managed Apple ID so that you have turnover, someone else takes over a process, you're acquired, well, you acquire somebody, who knows, right? You have an easy way to reset a password if you need to, or reset MFA, or add additional phone numbers, or whatever you need to do, right? So managed service accounts in Apple Business Manager are definitely a thing.
Great. Let's do another audience one. I think I saw a hand over here. Yeah, go ahead.
Similar to the pasteboard, is it possible to restrict screenshots?
Oh, it's a twofer. That's what
Okay,
So
yeah.
can screenshots or screen recordings be restricted for managed applications?
Fun fact, yes. However, it applies to the whole device. So you can do it unsupervised. However, it applies to the whole device. I'm going to give you a story about our former CIO, Dean Hager, who we all love dearly, and really hope he's enjoying his retirement. He DMs me one day, hey, Emily, can you restrict screenshots on my phone? Are you sure you want me? Yes, please do that. Okay, all right. Well, I can't do screenshots anywhere. Yes, that's true. So you can, but it's going to really hurt. And I know why they're asking that question.
Right.
I'm not
Yep.
completing thoughts because I think you're hopefully all on the same train with me, right? The idea is if you're going true DLP, what's stopping someone from a screenshot and OCR copying text out? That's more of a people problem, I think, than a technology problem, just to speak frankly with you all. I don't think you want to restrict screenshots on someone's personal device to get around that problem. If you're really concerned about someone going in and taking a picture of a whiteboard in a development area, probably just have them check their phones at the door when they go in, right? That's probably not the solution you want for that.
And if you're super highly regulated, I mean, no BYO necessarily can work
Probably.
for you there.
Yeah.
You end
Yep.
up doing an institutional device with the camera turned off and all those things. And that's just where we are. You got to figure out what's best for your org. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to count that one for this one. So audience, any other questions? Yeah, back there.
Yeah, so, you touched on people signing out that gets rid of the managed partition on the phone, but if you have to force that being signed out, how do you force the managed partition being taken off of the personal device?
You go to the device record and the management actions, or the management command area, and there's a button for unmanage, and you just click it. And then you'll see, it's real fun. I have all sorts of demo videos I recorded because that's a blast.
It's very
Click
fast.
the button, it's so fast. It's like almost immediate. You will see apps start pulling off, the ID comes out of settings, it's all gone. Poof.
If we
As
had a
soon
way,
as you
I'll
click
hook
that
up my
button.
phone and demonstrate right now, but
No, I do have my computer here. I could do it. We won't though. But
shut
yeah,
out,
it's
boom, it's gone.
and I'll call out too. How many organizations do have BYO implemented that are here? If you have people that are going and buying new phones this week, I would just recommend that they go in, sign out, take their last backup, migrate over to the new phone, and then sign in and re-enroll again. And what's cool about it is when they sign out, it's also marked as unmanaged and it's no longer a paid license in your pro server. So it all happens immediately, which is cool.
Cool. If you are signed into their consumer Apple or ID on Apple devices, let me see if this is a good one. Will they be forced to sign out and sign in with their new off-domain email on those devices? So
When the federation process
I think
happens.
with the reclaim federation process.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Yes, I believe so.
That's what I remember, at least.
Yeah.
The scenario there being someone someone at AcmeSoft created their personal Apple ID with their acmesoft.co email, and that's the personal Apple ID on their phone that's in conflict when you're federating. I think they start getting prompts to re-authenticate in when
Yeah.
the federation happens because the Apple ID flips. So they would need to sign out and then sign back in with hopefully the new Apple ID that they set up with that personal account.
Yeah, whatever they changed it to.
That's what I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yep.
I think we did that. You were signed out after 30 days, and then when you try to sign back in, that's when they force you to change it.
Okay, so what he said was after 30 days after federating, they're forced signed out, right? But you still have the 60 days to switch over the actual Apple ID. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, probably has to do with the refresh tokens and all that stuff. for
Yep.
that
Yep,
account.
yep,
Yeah, got it. Okay, let's do another audience one. Go ahead.
You can't install it. Okay, so
let
I'm
me-
sorry. The question is. Yeah, so what happens is, so the scenario here is someone already has, I'm
Edge.
trying to think of a,
Chrome.
Outlook is a good example. Outlook is a very good example. Thank you. Someone already has Outlook installed on their phone, and then they go into self-service and try to install Outlook, not realizing that or thinking, I can have my own Outlook and then work Outlook. iOS only supports one bundle ID on the device at a time for an application. The user will, I don't think the user gets anything. Nothing happens. It just looks like it stalls out. On the device record in Jamf Pro, you'll see in the command history, bundle ID, blah, 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 already exists on this device.
Yeah.
I don't even think they get an error. I don't recall. I think it just doesn't install at all.
Great feedback for Apple.
Yeah, that would be feedback for Apple.
That would be
on that one, yeah.
if you have those use cases, definitely put them as feedback. They do read those. No, it's an Apple
and that little
push.
install prompt that you see that says you're installing this, that's an Apple prompt. That's not a, because you can see in it, it says for us jamf.jamfcloud.
I do know in Jamf when you're setting up an app, there's a checkbox for convert to manage.
Yeah, that only so the checkbox on an app deployment that says if possible, convert unmanaged to managed, that only works on supervised devices. It does not work on unsupervised devices. And part of that is down to the licensing model. That install of that application is licensed to the personal Apple ID, not to the managed Apple ID. Right, so you can't take it over on unsupervised as part of that partitioning.
And just to take it a little bit deeper, like part of the great thing about this is that different partitioning on the device. So you have complete different partitioning of corporate versus personal data, and that's kind of important when it comes to things like e-discovery and PII and all that other sort of stuff for more compliant things. Where it's like, you know what? No, we're doing the best we can to make sure corporate data stays on this partition. We have complete control of that data, and that way, if there's ever an e-discovery or anything, you don't end up saying like people don't take the whole phone. They can only do what's the managed part. So that helps out a lot there too. Okay, you mentioned you can push a managed browser. Can you push a managed space for Safari? Answered. Okay, let's do one in the room here. Maybe two more, and then we'll call it.
Can an admin account, an ADM admin account be federated?
No. The question was, can an admin account for a Apple XM portal, a school or business manager portal, or business essentials, I guess, can it be federated? No.
We tried.
Yeah. We learned pretty early in our test process. Like, we had a secondary domain, and we went through the whole thing. We had a secondary ABM portal, a secondary Jamf Pro QA server, a secondary Azure portal, secondary Okta tenant, thanks to our Jamf Security Cloud friends that got us set up with that. We now have our own. We've flipped stuff around a few times at this point. But, no, it can't. Your admin, and I think there's a limit of 5 administrative accounts in a portal. Those have to be non-federated, because if federation stops working or you let the token expire, you want to be able to get back in. So those ones, I would just flip over to your reserved domain and keep them there. And then for us that are admins in ours, we have it's JamfCom 8.
Yeah.
I think we have up to 12.
We got a lot.
So our admin accounts are on the app reserved domain for that portal, and then we also have another federated account that we use for the BYO stuff and those other things.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? One, if your federation breaks or you change IDPs or whatever, you don't want to lose access to, honestly, business portal comes more important. Oh, you know what's real fun? So let's say you have employees that have worked for your company for a long time, that have probably have multiple Apple IDs. And let's say maybe some of them changed their name. And then you have aliases that exist in Apple Business Manager for different names that they may have had, or you've changed your domain, whatever. And then you have the Azure object with an alias. And Azure goes, hey, this account exists.
And it fails.
And then it just breaks everything for that poor person. And you have to go in and be, okay, I know you've got we've got to figure out how to clear this alias and flip the account around. And there's all sorts of fun stuff around that.
Oh, yeah.
One more interesting one on here that is a little bit of a curveball, but it's what about Android?
Our guy
That's
is
you.
here.
And
That's you.
Let me give my kind of product-y answer from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
trusted access story. Then I'd love to hear what you guys have done for experience. So what's beautiful about this is everything we talked about with user enrollment, which is everything you've seen here, is actually closely mirrored with what you have with work profile on the Android space. So when it comes to a kind of consistent strategy across the two platforms, you can have something. Because the reality is with BYO in particular, like it's BYO. People want to bring their own Android devices. Like Jamf Trust will work on Android device. We have a client for that. So the per app VPN works in a very similar way. A lot of the identity providers have apps for that for the two platforms as well. And like you have the managed space, they actually solve some of the managed versus unmanaged stuff a slightly different way. So there's a little nuance in behavior, but for all intent and purpose, when it comes to a BYO strategy, it's actually pretty nice because it actually fits fairly well and is understood. What would you guys say?
I'm going to give you my hot take, which is I think BYO for Android's slightly better than BYO for iOS. And I'm going to say that because you have a work profile with work profile applications that are understood as separate bundles from the personal partition on the phone. So and all the badging on the applications too, for example, when you look at a managed application on a BYO device, it'll have like a little like briefcasey looking little icon on it so you can tell the difference. And you can even on some models just swipe up slightly from the bottom and you'll see personal, work. And there's a very clear UI, like visual delineation between the work profile and the personal profile on the Android device.
On the Jamf Trust front, I like it because you can enforce it on the whole container versus per app. So you can make sure any interaction that happens on the work profile all goes through Jamf Trust for networking, which is nice.
Welcome to the JNUC session about how
Yeah.
we love Android BYO.
Tyler, would you like to come up?
Tyler, I'm not going to put Tyler on the spot. Tyler is our primary platform engineer for Intune, and he manages all of our Intune managed devices, which we do have at Jamf, which includes Android BYO, cloud PCs, and Windows devices that are used internally at Jamf. So come to our brain date tomorrow. He'll be there. He can talk shop with you on Android BYO if you want to.
Cool. All right, guys, I think we're going to call the actual formal session.
Thank you for sticking
But
around
we'll do it
and
up here
joining
for a little
us
bit longer.
today.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.